Hi, everyone, and welcome to Drinking Water 101, an introduction to River Network's Drinking Water Guide. My name is Katherine Baer, and I'm Director of Science and Policy here at River Network. This series will walk you through our Drinking Water Guide, a resource for advocates, highlighting the key pieces of information in the guide and questions to ask to understand your drinking water system from the source all the way to the tap. We've recorded a short overview of all the guide sections, and this session will focus on the question, what frameworks are in place to make sure our water is safe to drink? I'll be touching on what's covered in this section, and you can refer back to the full guide for more details, including links to references and case studies. You can find the guide in the link shown at the bottom of the slide. This section of our Drinking Water Guide covers the history and purpose of the Safe Drinking Water Act, the process for establishing drinking water regulations and standards, the types of regulated contaminants, how the state and federal government play a role together in protecting drinking water, a bit about enforcement, as well as other laws in addition to the Safe Drinking Water Act that can play a role in protecting our drinking water. Starting back in 1914, there were national recommendations for drinking water standards, but few states adopted them, leaving piecemeal protection for drinking water nationwide. By the 1970s, the problems related to drinking water and health were pressing, and it was clear that something broader was needed. So as a result, Congress passed the Safe Drinking Water Act in 1974, which provides a more comprehensive approach to regulating the safety of water coming out of your tap and applies nationwide. The law has been amended several times since it was first passed, and you can read and learn more about these changes in the Drinking Water Guide. So, what does the Safe Drinking Water Act actually do? At a broad level, the Safe Drinking Water Act establishes the maximum allowable contaminant levels that must be met by drinking water providers. Additionally, the law also covers areas like underground injection control program. It sets up the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund that provides money to the states, which is covered in Section 4. It requires source water assessments, which is covered in Section 1 of our guide. It requires water utilities to create consumer confidence reports for their customers explaining any violations that occur. And it also provides drinking water operators certification guidelines and research agendas. You can find the details of all of these in the guides. We'll focus more here on the process for setting drinking water standards. But first, it's important to understand what the Safe Drinking Water Act actually covers. The Safe Drinking Water Act covers what we call public water systems, which are water systems that serve at least 15 service connections or serve an average of at least 25 people for at least 60 days a year. Public water systems provide water to about 90% of the population. And so, for example, my drinking water here in North Carolina is from the Orange Water and Sewer Authority, which is a public water system serving about 85,000 people. Additionally, public water systems does not refer to ownership. There can be both public and privately owned public water systems, which is confusing, but it applies to both. And finally, the Safe Drinking Water does not apply to private wells, bottled water, or really small water systems, meaning those serving less than 25 people. The backbone of the Safe Drinking Water Act are the regulatory standards. The Environmental Protection Agency must establish and enforce these drinking water standards for public water systems where the contaminant may have an adverse effect on health, is known or likely to occur in public water systems, and where the regulation of the contaminant can provide a meaningful opportunity to reduce health risk. Right now, we're approaching 100 contaminants that are regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act, meaning that for those contaminants, there's a limit on how much can be in your tap water or a treatment technique that must be used to actually control that contaminant. As you can see in this chart, since 1996, there have been almost no new contaminants regulated. And the handful of new standards that have been set since that time were either explicitly mandated by Congress or were part of a package of statutorily mandated updates of pre-existing rules. So really not much movement since then. And this is because when Congress amended the Safe Drinking Water Act in 1996, they did it in a way that creates a much higher burden by adding health risk and cost-based analysis to the already lengthy process of regulating new contaminants. And we're going to turn to that process next. So the process for establishing a national primary drinking water regulation, this is the condensed version, which we're going to walk through. And it is explained more fully in the Drinking Water Guide, starting on page 33, and also in a companion recording, which we'd recommend to you, by our colleague Nick Leonard with the Great Lakes Environmental Law Center. But in summary, starting on this chart on the left side, the process starts with EPA publishing a list of contaminants that are currently unregulated, which may require regulation and are known or anticipated to occur in public water systems. This is called a Contaminant Candidate List, or CCL for short. Next, EPA monitors up to 30 unregulated contaminants every 5 years based on the Contaminant Candidate List as part of the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, noted here as UCMR in the orange boxes. After that time, EPA determines whether or not to regulate at least 5 contaminants on the current CCL every 5 years. This is the regulatory determinations in green. So it can go to yes or no. For a contaminant that EPA has determined to regulate, EPA then has 24 months to propose the regulation, and then 18 months after a proposal to finalize the regulation, which includes setting a maximum contaminant level or treatment technique for that specific contaminant. After that, EPA reviews each national primary drinking water regulation every 6 years, part of the 6-year review process, and revises those as appropriate. And although this is on a schedule, there are plenty of opportunities for the agency and stakeholders to delay these processes. Also note on this slide that there are plenty of opportunities for the public input and comment. These are typically fairly technical in nature, but they're an important place for advocates to pay attention to. And you can see those where you see the public review and comment icon on this diagram. So given that this process is fairly lengthy, much like the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act authorizes states to adopt their own more stringent standards if they want to. So given the slow process at the federal level, some states do choose to move ahead with their own standards. For example, with PFAS, a group of persistent chemicals which is showing up in drinking water in many places throughout the country. And as this chart illustrates, how states are actually moving forward on their own in advance of any action by EPA to regulate these contaminants. In the guide, we highlight several case studies about community-based advocacy for these state standards. Again, like many of our national environmental laws, the Safe Drinking Water Act has roles for both the federal and state and tribal governments. For example, the Environmental Protection Agency establishes the national drinking water standards, develops guidance and training, evaluates compliance and programming by states and tribes, and oversees the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund, a major source of funding for drinking water systems. At the state level, state agencies must adopt national standards at least as strict as the national ones, develop state regulatory programs to oversee public water systems, and enforce regulatory requirements. So a little bit about enforcement and compliance. Primary enforcement of the Safe Drinking Water Act is delegated to the states, territories, and tribes that have this delegated authority. Any health, monitoring, or reporting violations are fed into the National Safe Drinking Water Information System, which is available online on EPA's website, as shown below. Since we first published the Drinking Water Guide, there's now an easier way to find what you need in this system. This chart here shows a screenshot of EPA's new How's My Waterway site and has a section on drinking water. If you go to How's My Waterway and then go to the drinking water section and put in your zip code or city or county, you can come up with the water system that you're looking for that serves you or your community, and then link directly from there to the Safe Drinking Water Information System to find out if there have been violations of any standards. The Drinking Water Guide also covers how enforcement works, or is supposed to work. But we want to flag that even with the frameworks we have in place, there are disparate impacts with respect to how the Safe Drinking Water Act is implemented and enforced. Researchers examined rates of compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act over a 4-year period by race, class, and ethnicity, found that in communities with higher populations of Black and Hispanic individuals, Safe Drinking Water Act health violations were more common, and that these effects were more pronounced in the poorest of our communities. These disparities are ones we must address and the ones that advocates should keep in the front of our minds as part of our work. While the Safe Drinking Water Act is the primary legal authority for regulating drinking water safety, it focuses on pollution in the drinking water from the water treatment plant to the tap primarily. And so there are other laws that can also complement the Safe Drinking Water Act to help prevent and control pollution. These include a number of provisions of the Clean Water Act, including water quality standards, pollution discharge permits, and watershed-wide goals known as total maximum daily loads. Additionally, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act and the Toxic Substances Control Act are also laws that can help reduce pollution into our drinking water. You can find out more about them in the Drinking Water Guide. So by the end of a deep dive into Section 3, we hope that you will be able to answer some of these questions. And so these include things like, what agency in your state administers federal drinking water programs? Are there ongoing state or federal regulatory processes with upcoming public comment opportunities, and how do you find them? And when are public comment opportunities for the allocation of the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund? So with that, I want to thank you for tuning into this overview of Section 3 of our Drinking Water Guide. Be sure to click through our YouTube channel and website for additional deep dives on our Drinking Water Guide and to view our full library of trainings and webinars.